Hello, everybody. My name is Sil the DM, and you're joining me for today's recap for the week of January the 18th for my Sands of Calimare D&D campaign titled "The Father's Dreams." Now, picking up where we left off, the party sort of split. Riok entering his old home, Festhala, or sorry, no, that's the apartment complex. God damn it, my name and my brain and names, everybody. It's just not there today. I'm sorry. He entered into the toy shop his adopted father, Halder, used to run, and the rest of the party on Estevel went into the small adjacent toy shop. The party spent some time just getting involved in hijinks. Moores ended up finding himself inside of a toy wagon for the Giants, which was nearly as big as a real wagon, and getting bounced around when one of the giant children picked it up and wanted to see what was inside of it. They also found some beautiful glasswork, some marbles and beads, as well as some bone dice. And they all had a little bit of fun exploring the toy shop, and eventually met the owner, a woman named Sigarda, uh, who they know have some sort of connection to Estevel. During all of this play, Riok had made his way up to where his father was, and found the old giant, um, unclean, unshaven, uh, sitting against a wall, his face sort of just zoned out. And no matter what Riok seemed to do, nothing seemed to snap his father out of the state he was in. Um, Eventually deciding to begin climbing his father to try and get up to his face to really try and snap him out of what was going on. And while making his way up his father, there seemed to be this little pulse of energy. And Ryok managed to resist it the first time and continue climbing, but failed it the second time, and found all the light in the room going away. There was a bit of a flash of darkness, and then he realized he was climbing something else entirely, something much larger than his father. But still humanoid in shape, and as he was climbing, he slipped and fell, and managed to slowly glide his way down to the ground, uh, or what he thought was the ground, instead landing on what appeared to be some sort of doll made of yarn and stuffing. It almost looked not entirely unlike like a Raggedy Ann doll. And that's when this massive figure, whose voice was sort of booming out across this dark room that Ryok found himself in, was crying. And huge raindrops began hitting the doll, uh, bouncing off of it and nearly striking Ryok. In all of this, Ryok attempted to cast a spell. He attempted to cast light, and for some reason the magic seemed blocked, like there was an area in the room that was suppressing divine magic. This happened before he fell. Uh, and during the time where it took him to fall, he noticed someone else at the corner of the room and turned to see an AVX. Um, a very impressive looking AVX who was quite large, who bore a striking resemblance to Ramza, the member of the flight that Riok worships. Upon which the figure began to use some sort of magic to alter the winds, and Riok began to feel himself lifting up and up, and then gradually realized that not only was the air lifting him, but he had grown a sort of pair of spirit wings. The crow of the murder, the spirit he had made a shamastic bond to, landing on his shoulder, to sort of help the wings form. Riok, now with wings, flew up and up, moving along the body of this figure, avoiding the tears and the crying, and got up to the top of it and saw this haggard looking giant, this horribly sad figure, Jesus, and noticed a mark on his head. Um, it was at that moment that everything began to shimmer and shake, the vision beginning to lose consistency. And Ryok felt a sudden surge as Ramza, or the aspect of Ramza, pushed him up higher and higher, and then he was back in the room with his father, much above the giant, but falling now that his wings were gone. He successfully managed to glide down onto his father's shoulder, um, and noticed that his father had a similar red mark on his head. A mark he had noticed on the other giant bore some sort of rune or sigil. Um, his father still was non responsive to his pesterings, and so he uh, pushed on, climbing higher and further up onto his father, getting onto his head, and approaching the red mark on his father. Um, as he got there, he noticed that the mark itself appeared to be multiple giant runes written over top of each other, sort of over and over and over and over and over again until it became almost nothing but just a smudge. And Riok wanted to attempt to cast a spell. He attempted to cast a Cure Wounds, but as he began praying for that spell, he felt his voice change, like a second voice was overlapped, and he felt his prayers being altered. And when he released the spell, instead of casting Cure Wounds, he ended up casting something else. I believe it was something along the lines of Heroism, or I forget the exact name of the spell. Unfortunately, it's one that removes fear effects and makes someone immune to fear for a small amount of time. And the spell dispersed into the red mark, and it sort of exploded outward along the room, covering this whole massive workshop in runes. Riok attempted to sort of memorize or take in part of the runes, but it was all happening much too quickly. And then they all shattered like glass in the air, crumbling away, breaking almost like a layer of the air. It was a really odd moment for Ryok, and when they all broke and shattered and fell to nothingness, his father seemed to snap out of it and realize he was there. In his shock, Ryok had fallen a bit, and his father caught him gently. And realizing that his son was there, it wasn't a nightmare, it wasn't a dream, Haldir was overwhelmed and quickly hugged his son to his chest, um, just exclaiming how relieved he was, crying now uh, again. And there's this moment where he was just being held tight, and then his father began to wince and shake and grab his head in a lot of pain. Uh, he set Ryok down. Ryok was attempting to help somehow, but nothing seemed to work, and Ryok wanted to go get help. So his father set him down gently, and was trying to get up and couldn't move his legs. So Ryok panicked, mad dashed his way out of the house, taking several minutes because, again, it's a giant-sized house, and Ryok is not even a medium-sized character. He's small-sized. So he sprinted his way out and ran to the toy shop next door. Eventually getting inside and calling up, trying to find Estevel. And it was there he noticed Sigarda, who was Haldir's wife, and the woman who raised him sort of as an adopted son. When she noticed that he was there and that he looked panicked, she quickly ran around the table to rush over to him. This caused some hijinks, Everyone managed to pass their deck save to remain balanced on the counter except Kieran, who ended up getting knocked off when Moores finally managed to pass a deck save, sort of jumped up in exclamation and swung his hands back and clocked Kieran in the face. Uh, for raw good comedy. Um, and so uh, Kieran was falling, but Kieran is a kitsune, a homebrew fox race, who has access to a homebrew feat I made that allowed her to grow two more tails. She's a three-tailed fox, which gives her access to the slow fall spell, I believe. I don't know if it was a racial ability Kieran used for slow fall or if it was one of her bardic spells. I think it was the racial ability. Not positive. But she slow fell her way safely to the floor. Sigarda ran over and picked up Riok and asked what was going on, and he explained what had happened. And she rather quickly called Estevel over, passed Riok to him, and then ran to the building next door to try and take care of her husband. Estevel, panicked and unsure of what's going on, sort of just picked everyone up and was like, I need to get you all out of here till we can figure out what's going on. I'm going to run you back to Festhala, uh, eat some food. It was about lunchtime now, like, just be here and I'll deal with this. So the party managed to get back, and Riok was a little concerned, but also rather filthy from climbing his very unclean father. So Moores decided to take him up to bathe, as Luther was there and suggested they, again, continue using his room. Um, so Luther suggested that, and Nyx was feeling uh, a little panicked with how many people were in the room and was beginning to get rather tense. Because again, she wasn't very used to a crowd, and now they were in Festhala during the lunchtime rush, when people in shifts were enjoying their food and everything, and it was just this uh, deep-rooted panic sort of setting into her. Kieran, sensing this, decided to take her upstairs. Um, while this happened, Aesir sat down below at the table, just sort of watching Luther and Blair interact. As Blair had bought, Blair had borrowed more money because Blair has no money and has borrowed a lot of money from the rest of the party to purchase some of the nice marbles, which were all basketball-sized, beautiful glass beads full of color. Um, and she had picked. Sigarda only like sells them in like bundles, um, and so the party collectively picked. So many of the people of the party picked ones they liked, and Blair decided to buy one for Luther as a gift, and Luther was just rather infatuated with it, and her, of course, and was being much more forward with his flirting this time, especially now that she had brought him a gift. And while they were doing all of that, the rest of the party upstairs was getting into general hijinks. Riok ended up emptying one of the on-labeled bottles in Luther's bath into the tub and caused a bit of a bubble explosion uh, as he and Moores fought desperately to try and like get Riok clean, and were just really stressed out and having a fun time with it. Kieran was getting increasingly annoyed as she was trying to calm Nyx down, eventually having to go deal with those two and their nonsense. Nixandra was left alone for a moment and trying to avoid the full-on panic attack, was just doing deep breathing exercises. And as she was, the sounds of everyone else sort of faded away, and she heard a strong, familiar voice and felt a presence nearby and could smell the 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 distinct scent of leather armor that's well worn and freshly cut grass. And the voice instructed her in her deep breathing, encouraging her, helping her focus. And she felt a familiar hand go on her shoulder and squeeze to try and help her focus in. And when she went to look, there was no one there. And Nyx felt herself just begin to cry very quietly. Eventually, Kieran returned to the room and proceeded to sit with Nix and try to help. And Moores downstairs managed to distract himself by discovering a huge supply of fuck off beans inside the cupboards of the room. And Riok managed to finish his bath eventually. During all of this, Luthor invited Blair up to his room, somewhere where they could talk a bit more privately. Taking her past the floor where his room, quote unquote, is, um, she inquired where they were going, and he explained he had several rooms, and that the one that he was letting her friends use was one on his family's floor, kind of like his own apartment within the family complex. But he had his own private room on a separate floor. Um, and inside they realized it was a very similar layout, just much smaller. This space definitely looked more lived in than the other room. And they went upstairs and went to the bedroom where Blair found this beautiful panorama view of this circular room with these golden fields, a raining sky, dark clouds that on the ceiling faded away towards an astral sea of brilliant purples and violets, twinkling stars of white and darkness, and different little sized globes of pockets of existence. Um, and the two of them laid in the bed, which was a circular bed in the center of the room, so that at any point any part of the mural could be viewed. Um, Alright, I will call that person right back. And we basically faded to black with Blair and Luther's conversation. Um, I want to thank everyone for listening. Sorry, I have a phone call suddenly, and I have to go deal with that. Hopefully, I hope you're all excited to see what happens next, and what other hijinks we're gonna get into in Laputa, City of Wales. I'm extremely excited. Please like, uh, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.